Hello there. Am I narrow-minded, or is my husband too naive? I've had an argument with my husband, and it's really drained me emotionally. My name is Alice, and I'm in my 30s. My husband's name is Martin. We have one child, Mia, who will soon be in the 3rd grade of elementary school. Including my dad, we were living as a family of 4. My dad retired, but a certain company reached out and asked him to work abroad for about 2 years. He's already left for overseas, so now it's just the 3 of us. The fuss started because of my nephew, Philip, who's planning to go to college. Since we live closer to his college than his own home does, Martin was asked if Philip could stay with us while he attends school. The idea is that he would live with us until he can save up enough money from a part-time job to become independent. But there is no clear indication of how much money he needs to save or by when, so I have no idea. As far as I'm concerned, I was opposed to having a young man, who I only see at long family vacations, living under the same roof as me and Mia. I work from home, so I'm even less keen on the idea. When I told Martin my thoughts, he had an unexpected reaction. "How can you not trust Philip?" He was angry, and now we are in a stalemate, unwilling to give an inch. When Martin was first contacted about this, everyone, Martin, Thomas, Thomas's wife, and even Philip himself, seemed totally on board with the idea. Philip even directly told Martin that he'd like to be taken care of by us. Martin initially brushed it off, saying, "Mia is young, she won't mind. In fact, she might be happy to have an older brother." He seemed not to grasp the issue at all. How can she look up to a distant relative she hardly knows as an older brother? And so the argument continues. We're getting nowhere. Given that I own the house and it's under my name, I suggested, "I think we should wait for Dad to return to the country and discuss it together." However, Martin resisted. "You don't have to involve Stephen in this. We can just settle it over the phone. It's high time you became independent." He was not willing to listen at all. I started doubting whether I could trust what Martin was saying. The house is old, but it has plenty of rooms. I suspected that Martin and my in-laws had discussed this, and Martin wanted to keep a good face with Thomas. We text during work, but the gap between us remains. Martin texted me, "You can decide what to do, but you don't have to talk to Stephen until you've made up your mind. We have extra rooms, so there's no reason to say no." His opinion hasn't changed. He insists we can tell Dad after the decision is made. He's not giving an inch. I can't help but think anyone would be upset if their relatives were moved into their house without their consent, especially when they're not even around. But Martin shows no understanding. By the way, when I checked if they're planning to live for free just because they're relatives, he said, they are willing to pay $200. That should be enough for one person. $200 based on what standard? Do the in-laws think that's sufficient? I'm pretty sure that's not enough, no matter how you look at it. The unease only grows. How did they even come up with that amount? Is it just enough to cover the monthly groceries? I wish Martin and Thomas had consulted me sooner, so I could have talked it over thoroughly with Dad. But considering Dad is a good guy, but a bit stubborn, maybe they thought they'd have to meet certain conditions if they consulted him in advance. Now, I suspect they've been scheming behind my back ever since they heard Dad was going overseas. It's disheartening to even think about it. I decide to consult with a trusted close friend. A few days later, I decided to reach out to my best friend Rosalie for advice. Rosalie and I have been close friends since middle school. We've shared all the highs and lows, and I knew I could trust her in this situation. That's why I took the leap and contacted her. Rosalie was quick to adjust her schedule when I told her I needed to talk, no questions asked. We met in a private dining room at a restaurant. Judging from the tone of my voice, Rosalie guessed it wasn't a light matter and suggested we talk somewhere private, so we wouldn't be overheard. It was like divine intervention. It had been a while since we'd caught up, so initially we chatted about inconsequential things. After settling in, Rosalie gave me the cue, saying, "So," I laid out the whole story, how Philip, who's going to college, was asking to move in with us. That he said it would be until he saves enough money, but didn't specify the amount or the time frame. Martin seemed open to the idea and passed the decision-making on to me. Our house is in Dad's name, and he, currently overseas, flat out refused to discuss it when I brought it up. If Philip moved in, we were considering a rent of $200. On top of all this, I have Mia at home, and I'm not comfortable bringing in a male relative who's essentially a stranger. I think that, because of the house is in Dad's name, we definitely need his approval. I'm also suspicious that they waited until Dad was out of the country to bring this up. I got so emotional while talking that I cried and wasn't even sure if I got all my points across. Still, Rosalie listened attentively to everything I said. She occasionally rubbed my back and softly encouraged me to continue sharing. After hearing me out, Rosalie offered her opinion and advice. First, I should definitely check with Dad beforehand. She scolded me for even considering informing Dad after the fact, especially since Martin and Thomas should be asking Dad very respectfully for this favor. If Philip can't go to college without doing something like this, then maybe he shouldn't go at all. A $200 rent is absurd. And what about the shared responsibilities like cooking and laundry and utilities? Who's going to handle all of that? It's not comfortable to let Philip use the kitchen freely, and Martin is usually out for work, which means Alice, who works from home, will bear all these burdens. And Martin is either knowingly or unknowingly ignoring that. As for me, I felt I could have told him to take care of things instead, because I wasn't going to. That's what she told me. I felt understood by her words. Moreover, Rosalie added that she had been natural when listening to me. She wasn't siding with me. She said she was merely sharing a typical perspective. She also said that she supports my viewpoint and will offer help if needed. Feeling encouraged by my meeting with Rosalie, I decided to talk to Dad about it. The next day, I received a text from Martin saying it was up to me to decide, so I finally replied, "Then I have to say no." Martin shot back, "What's your reason for saying no? You just don't want to go to the trouble, do you?" "I won't accept that excuse," with a text that made no sense. It seemed like Rosalie was right. Martin had no real intention of taking care of things. He was just trying to push it onto me. I decided I would talk to Dad when I get a chance. Martin is probably worried about the conditions Dad might set. Even if Dad agreed, there would be stipulations like a curfew, helping around the house, maintaining good study habits, and so on. Since Dad practices karate, he might also require attending karate classes on weekends to instill discipline. If Philip can't meet even one of these conditions, Dad would probably have him go back to his home country immediately. However, if Philip really needs to this favor despite these conditions, I'm not heartless. I'll try to help him. The next day, I called Dad. As expected, he was uncomfortable with the idea of someone living in his home while he's not around, so he couldn't give permission. Instead, he said he knows a real estate agent and would try to arrange for them to handle it. After finishing my call with Dad, Martin came home with Thomas. Thomas happened to be in town on a business trip. I took the opportunity to tell them what Dad said. We can't allow Philip to live here, but a real estate agent could help find him a place. I told them directly. Both Martin and Thomas were furious. This changes things. We were planning to move things here soon, they said. Martin yelled, "Why do you even have to talk to Stephen about this?" And just as Mia tried to intervene, Martin raised a fist to hit her. I quickly stepped in and got kicked in the chest. I stumbled and bumped into Mia. In response to all of this, "I was only pretending to throw a punch. I never actually planned to hit anyone. Mia fell because you walked in. Don't get it twisted. If anyone's to blame, 90% is on you and only 10% is on me," Martin said. Why did everything change so suddenly? We used to live together so harmoniously. This is the first time something like this has happened, and I'm really shaken up. I work from home, so I'm still here, but Martin went back to his parents' house. As he was leaving, he snarled, "Don't go saying I've changed or that I'm abusive. You're the one who made me mad, so don't get it twisted." It sounds like a child's excuse, and it just brings me to tears. Fortunately, Mia only fell on her behind and wasn't seriously hurt. However, when I shielded Mia, I got kicked in the chest. It still hurt the next day, so I went to the hospital. Turned out, I had a broken rib. I also got a medical certificate just in case. Being alone at home makes me uneasy, so I briefly explained the situation and asked my aunt to come stay with me. I can't bear the thought of Mia getting hurt again, so I've taken some basic security measures, like installing a simple lock. Life has changed so drastically. It feels surreal. Martin says he'll commute to work from his parents' house for a while. He also says he won't come back unless I apologize and convince my dad to let Philip stay. To be honest, I feel like my feelings for Martin have cooled off. I think it would be manageable if Thomas would just let us live separately and ask for occasional help. I can't understand Martin's insistence on living together. Can a family really fall apart this easily? Is distant blood really prioritized over close family? I can't find answers, no matter how much I ponder. For now, the only thing to focus on is making sure Mia can live in a safe environment. Even if Martin were to return, I don't think my concerns would go away. At this point, I'm even considering divorce. My best friend Rosalie was right. It's unthinkable to let a stranger, even if they're family, live in a house that's in my dad's name. I plan to contact my dad again for advice. 2 months later, an update for you. After some heated arguments about letting my brother-in-law's college-going son move in with us, the divorce finally went through. After I filled Dad in on the details, he said he'd come back to the country. I talked to Mia, telling her we wouldn't live with Martin anymore because of the divorce. Mia looked sad, but she didn't say she didn't want to go. Perhaps memories of the violence held her back. Seeing her like this made my chest tighten. As I dealt with my rib pain and began searching for a lawyer, Rosalie, my best friend, once again came through. She introduced me to an attorney who specializes in divorce cases. She's like a guardian angel, always appearing when I'm in a bind. Since Martin returned to his family home, there has been radio silence. Even when I text him, there is no response. Once Dad was back in the country, he and Martin did talk over the phone. When I asked Dad about their conversation, he told me Martin had said, "The broken rib was 20% my fault and 80% Alice's. I'm more the victim here than anyone else." And when Dad tried to dig deeper, Martin just shut him down, saying, "I don't owe you any explanations." When I brought up the divorce, he was a bit flustered, but having already claimed he did no wrong, he was defiant, telling me to go ahead if I could. However, once the mediation began, Martin quickly toned down. We reached a settlement where he would pay compensation for the divorce and child support, and also pay damages for the abuse towards Mia and me. Later on, Thomas reached out to apologize. Along with that, new revelations about Martin, unknown to me, came to light. Originally, Martin had told Thomas that he would contribute $200 for Philip's living expenses. However, it turns out he was discussing with his in-laws about them giving him around $800. In other words, he was trying to sick him off the top. That's why he was so insistent on having us all live together. Martin loved golf and frequented the courses, which obviously cost money, but I thought he was spending within his personal budget. Apparently, he had a love for gambling since his college days, particularly horse racing. Neither while we were dating nor after we were married did he ever show signs of this. Needless to say, it was quite a shock. Moreover, he had been secretly accumulating debt, which may have been causing his desperation. It wasn't money borrowed from a mafia or anything, but the total amount was around $20,000, which stunned me. Upon hearing this, Thomas was understandably furious. "You may have taken advantage of our kindness, but you with such intentions are far worse. Plus, how are you not ashamed of resorting to violence?" he said. It appears Martin's change in behavior was likely due to his fear of his debts becoming public knowledge. When Thomas spoke to Martin, "We have an old house with plenty of rooms. You could stay here and commute if you chip in some for living expenses," he was told. Thomas naively trusted him and felt grateful. Even when he visited for business, he thought the deal was set and prepared to send his belongings. Upon discussing this again with his wife and acquaintances, we realized our behavior wasn't sensible. "We are deeply sorry," they apologized. Along with that, they extended a thick envelope. It was clearly apology money. However, forgiving Martin for this wasn't on my agenda. And even though I was unaware of these matters, I did harbor distrust towards Thomas. If you could prepare that much money, you should have given it to your son from the start to help him become self-sufficient. Then we wouldn't be in this mess. I politely declined. Thomas then offered his apologies once more and left, deflated. Several months later, after the divorce, Mia and I have been going to counseling twice a month. Since Dad returned overseas, we occasionally ask my uncle and his wife for support. Things were settling down when suddenly a letter arrived from Martin. Honestly, I didn't want to open it, but I saw it and decided to at least read it before throwing it away. "Long time no see. How are you? I regret losing my temper last time. I was scared of what you'd think if you found out about my debt. But now I think there might have been a solution if I'd been honest. How's Mia? Is she lonely without a father? I'm trying to change, to be a better husband and dad. I think you didn't really want to divorce me. You probably felt you had to, because of Steven. But don't you think it's time to stand on your own? I've cut back on golf and quit betting on horses. I'm making plans to pay off the debt. Why not consider living together again as a family? I know you both want it. I'll come to get you once the debt is settled. Take care." The letter was purely self-serving. This made me feel even more at risk, so I showed the letter to my uncle and his wife. They immediately contacted a lawyer to arrange a restraining order. The terms are, if Martin contacts us again, we'll demand $1,000 in emotional damages each time. If he continues, we'll report him to the police for stalking and send a formal document stating as much to Martin. I worried this might backfire, but my uncle and his wife said they'd handle it. My in-laws, perhaps feeling guilty, are also watching over Martin and cooperating. I had already asked the lawyer to seek Thomas's help, and it turns out that Martin is apparently mentally unstable now. He is still working, but sometimes mutters to himself, worrying even Thomas, who's made him start counseling. I wish he had sought help before things got to this point. Now, knowing he secretly took out loans and wouldn't hesitate to become violent, I'm relieved we got divorced. I just want a peaceful life now. Thankfully, I can work from home, so there are no financial concerns, and Mia is also settling emotionally and going to school. I hope for calm days ahead.